Now that we've discovered that unproven sires are best, then the big question is, well, how do you know who the best unproven sires are going to be? And of course, you don't. There is no formula. And that is kind of rule number one in the horse business. There is no silver bullet. There is no easy answer. Whatever you think is the easy answer is automatically wrong because it's going to be disproven the next corner you turn around. But it's very important, it's critical for people to be able to have some kind of opinion about how good this unproven sire, this sire who's going to stud, might be. We find it impossible to measure pedigree. I've tried this for 40 years. How do you measure pedigree? And I'm defeated. I don't know a way to measure pedigree, but we do know how to measure race record. And what we found is that a horse's race record has actually a high enough correlation to future success that to understand aspects of the race record is meaningful. Emily took 150 elements of a horse's race record, and she tested all these elements against future success. And she identified 9 criteria that had a high enough correlation to future sire success that they could be created and used as part of a formula. And here on the screen, you'll see what the 9 elements are. And when we started to look at this, we realized that there is a certain profile which kind of evolves. Now, I have to say, these methods that we're using, these predictive methods that we're using, will identify 60% of the top sires. They won't identify 40%, the other 40%. So the job of all of us as analysts and as people who are active in the marketplace is to be able to recognize when those 40% are becoming top sires and to be able to utilize them until such time as they become too old according to the calculations that we use. And one thing I should add about the sire's decline is that the better the sire, the really, really top sires, the world top 5 sires, they don't decline as much or as early. They go on later and better. But to go back to the 60%. So point one is the 40. When you find the 40%, you have to be able to use them as part of your strategy, and we do that as part of our strategy, our consulting strategies. But the 60%, a profile emerges, and that profile is that a horse has to do it more than once as a 3-year-old. Has to be a top class horse more than once as a 3-year-old. Why is a 3-year-old? Because that's the year that all the best horses from a crop of foals are going to be running against each other. 2-year-olds, only 40% of all 2-year-olds even start. 4-year-olds and up, the best 3-year-olds have been retired to go to stud, so they're somewhat picking up the pieces. But we do find that the correlation is highest with 3-year-olds, and also you can't just do it once. They've got to do it more than once. And the most interesting illustration of that was that Emily said to me, let's test the horse's second highest. We use the buyer number and we use the Racing Post ratings because they're so accessible. So Emily said, let's test the horse's second highest buyer or Racing Post rating, as well as testing the highest. And what she found decisively is that the second highest rating, the second highest speed figure, is a more reliable pointer to future sire success than the highest. So this came as a surprise, but it's very significant and it forms part of the picture. And interestingly, of the 9 criteria that you see on the screen, the one that has actually the highest correlation of all is the percentage of times the horse ran in the first 3. That has to be 75%. But as you can see, it's earnings per start as a 3-year-old, number of Group 1 wins, etc. And one important point I should say about the SSR project is that Apex ratings are earnings based, but all the SSR Group 1, Group 2 stuff is obviously black type based. So our whole analytical system combines earnings based statistics with black type based statistics. So besides the 9 criteria for what we called our original predictive model, there were so many people that wanted to know, well, what about what they did as 2-year-olds? So we did a 2-year-old model also, which has 7 points. And what we find is that and again, you'll see this on the table, on this table, is that we find that horses who score 9 out of 9, there's very few of them. And there's only been 13 since AP Indy. So in 30 years, there's only been 13 horses that have scored 9 out of 9. When we did the test, 6 out of the 7 that we had been by that point turned out to be top 20% sires. 5 of 7 turned out to be top 10% sires. And as we've gone on, we found those percentages have been maintained. From See the Stars, whose first foals were 2011, there was 8 years when there was no horse that scored 9 out of 9, and then 3 years in a row. First one was Gunrunner. Second one was West Coast, who's now unfortunately gone to Brazil, which proves that no system is infallible. And the third one was Too Darn Hot. So, it works. It can work. The first one since Too Darn Hot is City of Troy. So I'm here to tell you, City of Troy, he's a lock.